What's going on, everyone? So as usual, kind of keep this train going. Believe it or not, the Samsung Galaxy S7 review I did last year was one of the main and most important ones I did because a lot of people watched it and that's all I care about is views. Totally joking, guys. I got a comment on one of my last videos to stop joking, so this video is going to be no jokes at all. I don't even know I did joke, but the Samsung Galaxy S7 came out in 2016, which is actually pretty important because that was the year kind of where we saw the shift of like the design of the phone start changing. Now the Galaxy S7 was kind of early in that year, so it really still had like a lot of the bezels on the front and everything like that, but slowly and surely throughout the 2016 and especially throughout 2017, that's when we saw the shift of like notches and slimmer bezels and everything like that. And actually, believe it or not, within the last year when I did that Still Worth It for the Galaxy S7 in 2018, a lot of things have changed for this phone specifically, and not even including like the new Android version and the new Galaxy Note series as well, but a lot of things have changed with this. One of the things that haven't changed was actually the body, so it's still the same. Obviously, they're not going to go and change the body at all. In my opinion, I think it's fairly premium. It feels pretty good in the hand. You have glass on the front, obviously, and you have glass on the back, and this thing still feels honestly like a very premium flagship phones. I just had the Galaxy S9 Plus here and all these other phones, and I can tell you the Galaxy S7 still feels very, very premium. Like I said, there's a lot of bezel on it, but considering most phones in 2016 still had a lot of bezels, you have to kind of give it a pass. But like I said, shortly after this phone was released, we started seeing the change in most of the bodies for a lot of the phones. We also have the home button on the front with a fingerprint sensor, which is super cool. The fingerprint sensor I like a lot more than Face ID or any like face detection software, but the fingerprint sensor here is pretty decent. It's not amazing, but it's fairly accurate, I'll give it that. One thing I have to mention, and I never mentioned this before, with a lot of the used Samsung Galaxies and a lot of the older ones, with the ones with the home buttons, after a short period of time, I've noticed that with their home buttons, they get a lot more like creaky and a lot more wobbly than a lot of like other phones with home buttons, like iPhones, for example. So if you're getting a used Galaxy S7, I would definitely watch out for that. Most likely the fingerprint sensor will still work, but you don't want like a cheap feeling part on the front of your phone. And that's one thing I've noticed with the Galaxy S7s is that the home button just feels a little bit cheaper than a lot of the other parts of the phone. But so that's a pretty important thing to note there. Up front, we have a 5 megapixel front facing camera. We have a 12 megapixel back facing camera. So I'll talk more about those in a minute, but that's pretty much the synopsis of what this phone is bringing in terms of hardware. Going into more details, we have a 5.1 inch Super AMOLED screen on the front. It's 1440p. Very, very nice. I love this screen. The PPI is super high, the pixels per inch, 577 pixels per inch, which is crazy. That's way more than the iPhone 8 series, more than the iPhone 8 Plus, even more than the iPhone XR. So the screen on this thing, I like a lot. It's definitely one of the biggest selling points about this phone. Now, one thing that has actually changed quite a bit since the last year's video I did is actually the software version that it's on. So last year it was on Android Nougat when I reviewed it, and now it actually got the update to Android Oreo, which is still outdated. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of funny that it's like updated, but it's still outdated. But at least it did get an update, and that's pretty uncommon for a lot of Android phones to be supported for more than like 2 years. Interestingly enough, though, I know I talk a lot about custom ROMing and everything. If you want this phone, I mean, it's up to you whether you want a custom ROM it or not. I'm in the middle with this phone specifically just because it just got the update. I don't think it's going to get any more updates after this. It might, I could be wrong, but I doubt they're going to do that. Samsung's not going to push it. I've surprisingly seen a lot of Android Oreo ROMs out for it, and I would always recommend flashing a custom ROM on your devices. I know a lot of people have like a negative connotation to it. Oh, it's going to break my phone, it's going to break it, this and that. As long as you're careful and you read the instructions and you flash the right firmware on your specific phone, there's really nothing's going to ever happen. And surprisingly, I've actually seen a couple of Android Pie ROMs out for it too, for some of the variants for the Galaxy S7. I don't think for all of them, but for some of them. So obviously the Android Pie ROMs are not going to be as stable as the Android Oreo ROMs, but I still think it's pretty important to note that. So that's a huge change that's happened since last year. If you're interested in doing that, I will leave some links in the description to the XDA forums so you can get more information on custom ROMing and all those good things. So definitely check out that link if you're interested at all on custom ROMing. I'm not sponsored by XDA or anything like that. You can also go on the subreddit for the Galaxy S7. I see a lot of people talking about custom ROMs on there every once in a while as well. Now, in terms of the performance itself, it has an octa-core processor. I think it's super smooth and super fast. Heavier tasks and multitasking and all that stuff is very decent. It also has 4 gigs of RAM. So I think in terms of performance, it's solid. I think opening apps and things like that are still kind of slow. I think that has more so to do on the software side. But yeah, I think in overall performance sense, it'll get the job done. I don't think this phone is slow at all. Again, like I said, this phone came out in 2016, so it's not like horribly outdated at all either. One of the biggest problems I have with this phone though, especially with the software, and a lot of the problems, like I said, are with the software because the hardware is pretty decent. TouchWiz is still pretty bloated even on Android Oreo. Samsung is just always going to be bloated. They recently just switched to the One UI, so that's also pretty important to note. Obviously, Samsung is not going to update the Galaxy S7, so it's pretty much stuck where it's at. And I don't know, I think Samsung really just overbloats what the phone needs to have. I mean, they put a ton of features on it, some really not even needed. So I'll say in terms of performance, the hardware is pretty good, but the software is kind of where it kills it in my opinion. But again, a lot of that can be fixed if you flash a custom ROM, so take that as you may. But gaming is pretty good though. It's definitely on the better side of things. It handles casual games pretty good, obviously, but the heavier games are also pretty decent. I've seen a lot of Android phones, especially I think around like the 2015 era, they're really not too good in gaming, especially like 2014, 2015. Gaming on those phones were never too good. That probably has a lot to do with the chipset of that era. But what I'll say is that in terms of gaming and overall performance with the Samsung Galaxy S7, even in 2019, it's still pretty decent. Now switching to the cameras, I will definitely say they're on the better side of things for sure. Samsung, even at this time, was notorious of having like the best cameras, and I'll definitely say that it's on par with like the iPhone success at the time, even the iPhone 7. One thing I love about Samsung is that they put so many features in the camera app, unlike iOS where they just keep it bland. You even have to go into settings, a whole different app to mess with the camera settings. But with Samsung, they've put so many features in it. You can shoot 4K videos, which is super, super awesome. You can shoot 1080p videos at 60 frames per second, which honestly is pretty lame, but at least you have more frame option support. So in terms of that, I think the back camera is pretty good. The front camera, I'll be honest, is 5 megapixels. Okay, it's all right. I think in 2016, front cameras on Android phones were still in that box of not being so good, and this is no exception. I mean, it'll get the job done, but I don't want you guys looking more uglier than you are. So the front camera on this phone will just make you look even uglier. I don't want you guys looking more ugly than you are, man. That's pretty hard to beat, I'll be honest, but I'm totally joking. I think you guys are the best looking people in the world, but this front camera just makes you look a little bit grainy, so I'll just leave that as it is. I think the whole entire camera setup though, the back camera including the front camera, is definitely on the better side of things for sure. Now moving on to battery life, that is also one thing where it's like on paper it looks pretty good, but in real life usage it's definitely a little bit different. So it has a 3000 milliamp hour battery, which honestly is not a bad size. There's still a lot of phones coming out in 2019, even 2018, whatever, that have around a 3000 milliamp hour battery. So I think the size is okay, but I think it's the chipset, the hardware mostly, even the software, that really makes it not as good. So it's a pretty powerful phone. It's definitely on the heavier side of usage. The software isn't amazing for battery life, and the screen is fairly large. It's high resolution, high PPI. So depending on your usage, like if I took my usage and put it on this, I might not be able to get a full day usage out of it. I would definitely have to bring a charger with me. But again, if you're a very light user, if you just want to give a phone to your grandparents or your kid who's not going to like use their phone that much, it's not that big of a deal. This phone does not have a removable battery, which sucks a lot, but it's really, like I said, it's not that big of a deal if you're always around a charger. But don't expect, I mean, if you're an extremely heavy user of a phone, I probably would look elsewhere for a phone that has better battery life. Now, some other notable things to know. Now, these are pretty important, okay? The speaker is pretty bad on this thing. It's downward facing. I mean, I wouldn't really depend on it too much, but that's one thing to note. Another thing, there's no USB-C. They eventually put it in the next version, the Galaxy S8, but this phone does not have it. It has a standard micro USB, so that could be a breaker for you. That could be a deal breaker for you. It just depends. For me, it kind of is, because USB-C is the future. I would rather have, if I was getting an Android phone right now, I'd rather get one with USB-C than micro USB, but that's one more thing to note. But on the bright side, it still has a headphone jack, so if you're into that kind of thing, if you still want your headphone jack support, if you haven't moved on yet, if you're still hanging on that, this phone supports that, so I guess you won't have to worry about that. Now, the greatest notable thing to know for this phone, I saved it to the last point, this phone does have expandable storage, so that means you can put in your micro SD card and expand the storage even more, which is amazing. I love that about this, and I can't believe they took it out on the Galaxy S6, but they added it back in with the Galaxy S7, and that's one more reason to pick out this phone. So as a package, I'll definitely say that since last year, this phone has changed a lot, not only even in terms of software, but in pricing as well. So last year when I did that video, they were selling for around the $250 mark, maybe a little bit less, maybe that's highballing it a little bit, maybe definitely around the $200 mark. I've seen a lot for in 2018 that were being sold, but towards the ending of 2018, obviously early 2019, the selling price of this phone is actually around the $120 mark. So So the phone went down almost like whatever that is, 40% in depreciation, which is a pretty big deal. And it's a pretty decent deal now. So I'll definitely say that if you can find one for around the $120 mark, even like $100, $130, whatever, in that price range, that is not a bad deal at all. I think the build quality is pretty premium. It has a super nice screen, has expandable storage, and if you can flash custom ROMs on it, that's just like one more plus on it. So I'll say overall it's a pretty nice package even in 2019. But there's some other Android phones that I would also recommend around this price tag, like the OnePlus 3T is the one that I can think of right off the bat. The Google Pixel, the original one, that's also around this price tag. But again, if we're talking about the Galaxy S7, I would recommend it. It's really not that bad of an option. It's actually on the better side of things for sure. Now you can find a used Galaxy S7s on eBay or Craigslist or whatever, but I will leave an affiliate link for the Galaxy S7s that I find on Amazon for the cheapest prices. So if you guys want to help out the channel at the same time, definitely buy it through that link. Or even if you want to buy any other phone or even anything at all, buy it through that link in the description so you guys can help out the channel. You can help me buy more phones to review and do more giveaways, things like that. So links are in the description. But that is pretty much it, man. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or anything, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those links are linked down below. I would really appreciate if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.